Good morning, warm greetings, and welcome to everyone. I hope you are safe and in good health as you join us for this interesting FinTech India DigiCon session. We would like to start by thanking everyone for making time to be here with us today. Now, FinTech ecosystem in India has evolved significantly with a considerable effort from financial institutions, startups, the government, venture capitalists, and regulators to create a conducive environment of collaboration and consolidation. In the last few years, the Indian economy, which is significantly cash-driven, has taken advantage of the fintech opportunity. Now, with a range of options, including e-wallets, lending, wealth management, and insurance, the variety of services provided in this sector are immense and have changed the way consumers carry out their daily transactions. The fintech community in India, supported by a foundation of interacting organizations and individuals, is producing goods and services of value to customers who are themselves members of this ecosystem. And it is already a given that the future of fintech is brighter in India than ever before. And now, without any further delay, we would like to introduce our panel for today. Joining us and moderating this session today is Mr. Amol Dete, who is the editor for ETPFSI and ETCFO, the Economic Times. Now, ETPFSI does the in-depth coverage of BFSI and fintech sector, and ETCFO covers the CFO community. He is a financial journalist who specializes in finance and fintech sectors. And in the last 12 years, he has worked for various media houses across television, print, and online at CNBC TV 18, Z Business, DNA Newspaper, and FinBusiness. Thank you for joining us today, Amol. And our
Thank you, Amit.
Sure. And our next speaker and panelist is Mr. Manish Bhatia, who is the President of Technology, Analytics, and Capabilities at Lending Card. Manish is responsible for building a scalable technology stack for the company and bettering operational agility, risk management, data, and analytics, while driving strategic efficiency and improving overall customer acquisition and experience as well as business growth. Thank you for joining us today, Manish.
Thank you for having me.
And I would also like to welcome to the panel Mr. Nath Parmeshwaran, Director of Corporate Affairs for PayPal India. He is responsible for driving advocacy, strategy, and public policy in e-commerce and online payments for PayPal with regulators, government stakeholders, and trade organizations. Thank you for being here with us, Mr. Nath.
Thank you for having me here, Amit. Look forward to the session.
Sure, sir. And joining Amol, Manish, and Nath is Mr. Sarabveer Singh, CEO at Policybazaar, India's leading insurtech company. Sarabveer is responsible for overall business performance of Policybazaar. Prior to joining Policybazaar, he was a venture capitalist and also served in senior leadership positions with digital and media companies. He was most recently the managing partner of Waterbridge Ventures, a leading early-stage venture fund. It's great to have you here with us, Mr. Sarabveer.
Thanks, Amit. Happy to be here.
Thank you, sir. And completing the panel, we have with us Mr. Mayank Patwal, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Aditya Birla Health Insurance Company Limited, a joint venture between Aditya Birla Group and MMI Holdings of South Africa. Mayank set up Aditya Birla Health Insurance in 2015, and under his leadership, within a short span of time, ABHI has grown into one of the recognized and fastest growing health insurance companies in India. And now we are all set for the panel discussion. But before we indulge ourselves in this highly informative and dynamic session, we need your help to fill out and submit a quick poll. Now, this poll that you can see on your screens now will assist us in streamlining today's session and will also pave the way for future sessions of FinTech India DigiCon series. Scroll along and select your answers, and when done, click on the submit button. We will share the results as soon as we have all the completed poll and submissions. And we have received an enormous number of queries from all of you present in the audience. Our panelists will address them during and after the discussion. And you're welcome to ask more questions through our Q&A function throughout. So we have the results of the poll with us now. And from our audience, a whopping 67% of the audience believes that one of the major challenges that is faced by the fintech environment is the regulatory uncertainty. And around 33% people, there's a tie, there's a three-way tie in our next question, where 33% people think that data analytics, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurities are going to be the most relevant technologies in the coming next 12 months. 67% of the audience believes that lending has the highest potential for adoption of fintech in the market, and 33% audience and 67% audience believes that fintech startups are going to prove to be the most disruptive in the fintech ecosystem in the next 5 years. So Amol, with the answers to this poll, I think it is time for me to keep the panel open and hand it over to you. So Amol, would you like to please elaborate on this and set the context for this session discussion?
Yes, Amit, thank you. In fact, thank you so much for this, good highlights. And I'm really glad that the participants actually, shared their views, so we could got some numbers also. I will try my best to incorporate that in my questions, and will try to get the perspective from the August panel that I have. I must congratulate, the organizations in the Federation for organizing this event, because this is really crucial, and also bringing, a different people here from different sectors and the segments. So again, thank you so much for inviting us. And to begin with, I have been covering this space, and what is the major observation that I have is, fintech has been constantly and consistently evolving. What started with the wallets or the payment has now shifted to lending, absolutely, and now they're also going ahead, and trying to see that how we can go borderless, how we can go to adopt RegTech, how can we be, a part of cryptocurrencies, and every day, there is some fintech emerging or coming up with different ideas. And the biggest thing that is going to happen very soon is now the fintechs are also focusing a lot on the tier 3, tier 4, and also the smaller towns, because they have also realized that somewhere the urban India has saturated, and going in Bharat is the only way, to go and grow. So agri fintechs is another area which is absolutely growing into the rural spaces, and I have been meeting so many people, those who are interested in this space, not only just investors and fintechs, but also the IT experts. They really want to do something, in the agri space. So that is another thing. So the point here is, the fintechs are absolutely evolving. Even if you look at the data of 2019 and 2020, when we went under the lockdown, everybody thought that, oh, most of the fintechs will vanish, most of the fintechs will become outdated. There were 1 or 2% fintechs, yes, they became outdated. But if you look at the data of the investors in investments, most of the fintechs raised more money than they had actually raised in 2018 and 2017. In fact, in one quarter, we competed with China, and we in fact crossed the investments that even Chinese fintech had raised. So the story of Indian fintechs is rising. The story of Indian fintechs has really a great potential. But the topic for the today's discussion is also very relevant, because that is the immediate and the next step for the fintechs. Yes, we shifted from payment to credit, and now credit we are exploring to different markets. But ultimately, we have to see specifically, and why the fintechs have to see is because you are offering an innovative technology. What you have to see is, how are you going to do a socio-economic impact? How are you going to make a societal impact on the large population? Because the people in the rural areas are still unable to go to the banks, unable to visit the financial institutions. No matter how seamless the technology is, it's not easy for the end user to even buy a mutual fund through a mobile application, because there are challenges, there are linguistic challenges, there is awareness challenge. How the fintechs are going to solve this problem is going to be a big thing in the near future. When they do that, I'm so sure that the ecosystem for the socio-economic development will be created. And I can see that many fintechs, insurtech companies, and tech fins are actually heading in this direction. They have already started working closely with the SMEs, MSMEs, which are actually the backbone of this particular society. So, not to spend more time on my introduction specifically about the current situation, these are the major highlights that I told you. But moving ahead, I have, as we have seen, the 4 top speakers from the industry, and I will take the perspective on the topics that I just spoke about, and also the result, points that you shared, and also, the topic and the agenda that we have. So to begin with, I have some common questions and I have some specific questions. So to begin with, I will, start with my first panelist. or the speaker, Mr. Manish Bhatia. And my common question for all of you is going to be, importance of fintechs in building socio-economic ecosystem. So, Mr. Bhatia, I will come to you and would like to have your views on the socio-economic ecosystem of India.
Yeah, no, I think thanks for the introduction, Amol. I think and thanks for setting the stage. So if you really think about what is building a socio-economic ecosystem, it's about how communities and individuals are able to gain resources, right? And so that they can meet their basic demand, right? I think most of the issues that we're running into is this poverty cycle where because of where you work, to what education you get, to how much money you make, it's a very difficult cycle to overall break. Now technology, I'll just take 2 minutes, right? Technology actually has an egalitarian property, which is it equalizes everything for everyone, which means that if a person is in a tier 1 city, and a person is in tier 3 city, if he's using YouTube, if he's using search, if he's using commerce, the experience that these guys would experience is exactly the same. So it has an equalizing property. Now with data, access to information has become so easy. So now everybody is talking YouTube and social commerce and social. Now, where does fintech sort of fit into this, right? Where now with access to information, I think the aspirations of individuals have become significantly higher. Now, it could be where a person actually wants to payments. It could be where he has aspirations to build a business, or he has aspirations to buy an AC. And getting credit to individuals have become a really important problem to solve, because most of these individuals have been away from the segment that generally gets credit, right? About 4 to 5% of Indian population actually have a credit card. So now how do you solve that is where fintechs have to really step in and understand what sort of data analysis you could do on top to get the credit worthy people access to credit. And that is where I think fintech is going to play a huge part.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bhatia. In fact, valid points. I will move ahead and take another perspective from Mr. Parmeshwaran. Mr. Nath Parmeshwaran, can I have your perspective on importance of fintechs in building socio-economic ecosystem? Your opening remarks. Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Parmeshwaran, and speak? I think we'll move ahead and Mr. Parmeshwaran, can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Parmeshwaran? Okay, I think there is some issue with the Mr. Parmeshwaran in connecting him. So, Mr. Singh, I will come to you, and, would like you to take the same question, the importance of, fintechs and socio-economic ecosystem.
Yeah, sure, Amol. I think, as Manish was pointing out, actually, we have no other alternative in a country like India, where, we have such wide disparities in income, in the way we behave, culture, language, the fact that we are a large country. I think there is no way that we can, take financial services to the masses without having, without technology being the key driver. As you know, we've been, independent for the last 75 years almost. And we have tried a lot of things, right? We have bank branches, we have public sector banks, we have private sector banks, we have NBFCs, we have cooperative banks. So we have tried a lot of, issues. And we still are, a long way to go in terms of what we want. So I think it's very clear that the model that will work will be driven by technology, because it is not possible to do anything else. So I think that's point number one. So I think we all have a huge, role to play, and it's our responsibility, to get this done. The second point I'll just like to make is that, the whole word fintech has become largely redundant, because there cannot be a financial institution which does not use technology anymore. So I think the question then becomes that what is fintech? Fintech, I think, is a spirit. more than really the literal translation of the word. And the spirit is that, we have to do things in a different manner, in a manner which is, easier for customers to use, to understand, and, interact with. And I think that spirit is more important than whether it's a startup which is doing it or whether it's a large bank or, someone, somewhere in between. So I think that is the second point that I just like to make on this topic. And finally, the third point that exists is that, if you see the way payments, which has perhaps the farthest along on this ecosystem, you find that the way the Indians have taken up payments, right? And the fact that whether there are small people in smaller towns, larger towns, rich, poor, everybody has, taken to the whole UPI infrastructure. I think last month there were over 2 billion transactions. Just shows that if you give some value, if you create something which is which makes people's lives easier, people are more than willing to, interact with it. So I think the earlier premise that was there about India that, people are resistant to change and, all those kind of, I think, myths that we had are clearly broken. Because if you see today, I would dare say that our payments infrastructure is perhaps better than many developed countries in the world. And more and more Indians are using it. So I think if you take these 3 points, what you realize is that it's up to us. There is a large opportunity. This is perhaps the only way to do it. And, we have to find solutions which resonate with people and they will get taken up.
I think you gave me a headline. Fintech is a spirit. It's a very, what you can say, a different anecdote, Mr. Singh. Good words. Thank you for that note. And I think we are back with Mr. Nath Parmeshwaran. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, Amol, can you hear me?
Yes, I know you're traveling and still managed to join. That's really nice of you. So please go ahead, and we would like to have your opening remarks.
So, Amol, I think all my fellow panelists have really covered a lot of ground. I will just focus on 2 constituents, as we look at this fintech ecosystem and the socio-economic impact, right? On one side is the small SME, who is trying to now go from offline to digitization, okay, and really, cater to his customers. Number 2 is the actual end consumer. So as fintech service providers, the laser focus has to be on this, how do we digitize the SME? On the other side, how do you give confidence to both the SME and the consumers to undertake this digital transactions? So my view is that, building trust in this ecosystem for our services, okay, as digital not just becomes important, but essential post-COVID, okay, is going to be absolutely important for all the, players in this value chain to really take, fintech and this whole ecosystem to the next level. So I'll stop here, and in the next rounds, probably dig a bit more deep when we talk about, how do we use fintech to take, new financial services to these underserved MSME and consumers. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, fintech's a lot of partnerships with SMEs, and we'll drill more and would like you to share more perspective there. So, Mr. Badwal, I will come to you and, would like to take your opening remarks on the topic, how can fintechs create the importance of fintechs in the socio-economic ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Amol. I think I may just probably reiterate some observations and also add to that. One is that as we look at we keep talking of this whole issue of financial inclusion, and financial inclusion is not just about it's all aspects of money, right? Protection, lending, investing, etc. And what, to my mind, fintech does is that it democratizes the access. Today, it's not about in the earlier days we used to say that, oh, if you're in the in the top locations, and the manufacturer or the distributor will be present. If you're not in one of those locations, you may not have access, right? And I just want to kind of broaden the definition of fintech. Just as Sarvesh said, it's a spirit. I want to broaden in more practical terms, to say that it's not for us. Let's say it's not just about fintech, it's insurtech, it's health tech, everything that will finally create more access. So one is it democratizes access. The second is that it really brings down the cost in all aspects, whether it's acquisition cost, engagement, delivery of service, all of that, which used to be a barrier in the affordability from a consumer perspective. I think it brings down so the cost of experiencing a financial product comes down significantly in that sense. And third is that it also helps in a lot of way in personalizing the offering to that particular consumer. So it's not a one fit all. It gives an opportunity to kind of see how the offering is actually fitting the need of the consumer, depending on which segment they come from.
Mm.
So I think these are 3-4 areas that I look at in the way fintech, health tech, insurtech, as an organization, when we look at partnership with them, these are some areas that they really come in and help us solve problems in these areas. And which of course means that you're able to reach out to many, many more consumer segments. You're able to make your offering much, much more relevant for them, and you're able to make them much more affordable to them, which is finally what will, define not just inclusion, but continuity of inclusion in the long term.
Okay, absolutely, Mr. Batwal, and I think valid points from all of you. And thank you so much for setting the tone and sharing your perspective on the topic about socioeconomic. So I have now some specific questions for all of you. And Mr. Bhatia, I will start with you, since you are heading non-deposit taking NBFC, and I'm so sure that now more than the banks, in fact, NBFCs have a lot of partnerships with the fintechs. Be it for the loan aggregator or some other things that they are going to do. So if you could tell me, how can fintechs actually create the business value for a company like you and overall financial institutions in a new normal world?
Yeah, no, a great question, right? So overall, so fintechs is about the spirit. So keeping to that statement, right? I think if I talk about fintech startups, right? What we've realized is, every startup actually is trying to solve a very innate gap with their basically tech first, right? And they're able to actually really address an open issue that larger NBFCs, banks might not look at it because they have a portfolio of products to sort of cater to. So that is where a fintech startup or a fintech comes in, where when they've been able to actually figure out that innate gap, and they've created a product that will actually solve that customer problem. Now, once we figured out that that specific product has solved a customer problem, is when NBFCs and bank could actually engage with them to say, okay, with my portfolio of things that I'm seeing, here are the different issues that I'm seeing. There's a point solution I can give you, right? So there are these sachet products that are really ripe for usage. They figured out a problem set which is deep and complex. And how do big NBFCs and banks and other financial institutes actually partner with them to actually create a win-win situation when it comes to actually doing this? So even with us, right? So throughout the portfolio of products, from origination to acquisition to actually dispersal and collections, there are various of these different partners we work with, where one is you actually create an IP of what you build, right? The other is there are IPs that other people have done in a very substantial way, which is deep, which is probably built on AI, ML, or whatever, right? So how do I use that to actually create a better product for my customers is where I feel lots of synergies lie.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bhatia, for that note. And I think Mr. Savir Singh's comment about fintech is a spirit is going to be carried henceforth in many forums, I guess so. So Mr. Parmeshwaran, tell me something more about the SMEs and MSME partnerships. As Mr. Bhatia spoke specifically on the banks and the financial institution sides, let's go a bit deeper with a small segment. So SME, MSME, how can they benefit more from the fintech collaborations and partnerships in terms of building a great ecosystem?
So, Amol, I would say that, democratize financial services. What we are also trying to do is, how do you democratize trade? Okay. So SMEs really thrive on trade. Either it's B2B or B2C. So there is the domestic market, but there is also, in your opening remarks, you said about a borderless commerce, right? So we are talking about how do you take Indian SMEs to the globe? Okay. There is a demand for Indian products and services by global consumers. It has never been more important or never been bigger before than this pandemic and post-pandemic as we are trying to recover.
Right.
So what we have looked at, to Manish's point, is, can we solve a problem where, traditional financial service providers, when it comes to global access and international payments, have been typically underserving this community. So what PayPal has done, over the years, is that looked at this problem statement and said that how do you give access to these MSMEs to a global consumer network. So for example, with us, they are able to access 200 markets, 377 million consumers. Number two is, why do they use PayPal? Because the global consumer on the other side is absolutely trusting to part his hard-earned money with an Indian small MSME, to buy a goods or service. Okay, so that's the kind of area that we kind of thought is the most relevant for SMEs in India, and especially during pandemic and post-pandemic, we saw that this was an area how we could kind of help them as a platform. It's a win-win. They export goods and services, we get them the payments, and we actually get a revenue out of it. Okay, the socio-economic impact of this is very fascinating. Okay, is because every SME brings in foreign exchange, growing India's exports. This money that he receives is actually giving it off to subcontractors to produce his goods or services. And the transmission effect in economy, as they say, is super fast when it is on an SME. At the same time, I'll also bring to the next aspect is an SME. What we have seen as statistics, number one, is that who is non-digital, who is digital grows 2x of his non-digital counterpart. When you bring in digital payments and when they try to grow international, they grow at 2x of it. Okay. And when you bring in the next element of lending at the right time, okay, their business can grow actually 5x. Okay, so this is a kind of ecosystem. So you start with payments, then you take him international, then you give him lending at the right time. Okay, using the fintech and the underlying payment flows, as a additional input to the underwriting, it really can boost the MSME ecosystem. And why we are so passionate is they are one of the most impacted communities during this pandemic. If you see the government, everybody is trying to support them. And we feel that there is a huge opportunity in this fintech ecosystem on payments, lending, and remittances for this community.
Okay. Mr. Singh, your view specifically, because now you're a unicorn, you're operating in this space specifically in a digital or an online space since almost, I think, a few years. And I'm so sure that you must be having a lot of partnerships with fintechs and insurtech companies. How has been your experience in terms of, partnering with them, collaborating with them? How has been the result, of these partnerships?
So I think, Anmol, I guess we ourselves are sort of one of the original, I would say, fintech companies. Policybazaar is in its 13th year now. And, we started, we are a mission-driven company. Our mission is very clearly has been the same for the last 13 years, which is to help the middle class in India deal with death, disease, and disability. So we believe that, the fundamental challenge for the middle class is that because, our social security systems, etc., are not as they are in some advanced countries. If there is any kind of accident or any incident that happens to the chief wage earner, whether it's because of health problems or whether it's because of their death, it sets the family back. So I think, as all of us have probably seen, there are many examples like that where, if something happens to the chief wage earner, then the family can slip back into, years of financial challenges and problems. So I think insurance, plays a very vital role in that. And it is, Policybazaar's focus to help consumers with the right, choice of the insurance policy that they would like, and explain to them, which policies are giving them what kind of, outcome. Because one of the challenges in insurance is the opacity of the whole process, right? It's hard to understand. The products can be complicated. There's a lot of jargon. So I think you want to make sure that you, explain that. So I think that's kind of from where we come. We work, of course, mostly we are kind of the other side of the question that you asked, in the sense that insurance companies like Mayank's company, we work very closely with them to actually take their products, in a digital way to customers, explain, to customers, and help them have smoother and, more easier to do journeys, and buy insurance. So I think that's the role that we play. And as far as partnerships and other things that you asked, we are a little bit limited in our ability to do partnerships simply because insurance is a very regulated sector, and there are a lot of rules and regulations around what we can do and what we can't. And the second thing, which I will say is perhaps an even more important point, is that what we have learned at Policy Bazaar, that, it is the person who has the direct consumer relationship, is the person who really builds value. So you will not see us do a lot of, I would say, which is kind of against the grain of what people believe is right in India, which is, sachet products, attachment products. Because what happens, especially in insurance, is that these sachet and attachment products are only good for the distributor. They, lead to a lot of, there is nothing much happens. So the claims ratios on these products are very low. So customers actually don't benefit very much from buying them. It seems like a no-brainer that let's buy insurance for 100 rupees or 200 rupees. But actually there is no value to the customer. And most of that 100 rupees is actually goes to the distributor rather than actually either the manufacturer or the customer. So we actually believe that while those are easier to sell, they are not good for the consumer. And we focus a lot more on very basic policies. So, whether it's health insurance, whether it's term insurance, we focus on these products. And if you see our history over the last 10, 12 years, we have, sort of driven this whole, process and, build this thing. And I think just to link it back to the whole fintech issue, I think this is what really, all companies will eventually have to do, which is to find their mission and drive their mission. Because, it's not possible to just, in my opinion, out bank people on what they already know how to do. I don't think anyone else can do a bank's job better than them. You have to figure out a point of view and really build on that point of view.
Okay, noted, Mr. Singh. And I will move to insurance again with Mr. Bhatwal as well. And Mr. Bhatwal, insurance is a sector even today after the privatization, it's low into penetration. There is some pickup that we saw after the COVID-19 in health insurance segment. But what I think the fintech or insurtech has done is given a lot of options for insurance companies in distribution model. And I'm so sure that you must be having a lot of partnerships with insurance companies and fintechs. My question to you here is, how do you actually measure the result of the partnerships that you have with the insurtech or the fintech companies?
Yeah, no, relevant question, Amol. So as you said, if the product is important from, let's talk about the business that I'm in, health insurance. Now, is health insurance relevant for potentially every Indian? Of course it is, right? And COVID time has shown that why is it relevant? So the question is that why have we not been able to make it an offering that every Indian buys? And so to me, there are 2-3 problems, and that's where the fintech, insurtech players come in and help in that process. And one of them has been just the ability to reach those customers. How do you reach there? Because setting up distribution, physical distribution is not possible. It's too expensive to be built, and that's where firms like Sarveer has set in, Policy Bazaar, they help, right? Because they help in reaching out to the in Indian consumer to the last mile. Anyone sitting anywhere in the country can buy an offering through those platforms. Now, whether an insurance company can build their own platform, of course they can, but consumers seek larger access. They want choices, and that's where a platform like Policy Bazaar helps. Similarly, the other question is that how do you make the offering relevant to consumers, right? Even if I'm able to reach, consumer will not buy unless it is relevant. And that's where, to my mind, I think COVID time has clearly shown, for example, with the success of COVID and all that, product specific, that if you create relevant offering, the same distribution fintech, in partners that you have, and and it is not necessarily always digital. The fintech also comes in enabling your physical distribution setup also to be able to sell much better to a customer in terms of making the whole experience of the prospecting customer as that they see that the offering is much more relevant to me, right? So all of those are also areas that we are able to kind of look at potential partners. So we work with partners like Policy Bazaar and other distribution side, partners who are primarily digital. And of course, we work with tech platforms which makes or even physical sales process much more seamless. And the way to look at the effectiveness is very simple. Are we able to reach out to much larger mass of Indian consumers? Are we able to make a product seemingly more relevant to Indian consumers, and therefore are we able to sell more, experience more? We take feedback from consumers in terms of what was their experience just of the distribution process. on an ongoing basis? Is that relevant? But as I said, Amol, ultimately it's not about only acquisition, because we find a lot of customers in India buy product and then fall off. So it's about creating a sustained experience for them, that so that they see value. Insurance by definition is I pay, I may not get a immediate return. It's a risk product, right? So consumers start seeking more. So unless you create the right experience through and through the journey, even if they're not taking a claim, they start falling off. And that's where again a lot of these tech partners help you in creating very hyper personalized engagement journeys with these consumers, so that they start seeing relevance. So there are many areas, and I see a lot of opportunities to work with these I would say energetic ideas that these youngsters and young organizations and people with experience also are bringing in. Some will succeed, some will not, but I think it's a great way to find out what will work ultimately.
Okay. Like in the beginning, when we had this poll or a survey, 67 people spoke about the regulatory challenges. I mean, regulatory challenges are not just for I'm sure the fintechs or insurtech companies, but it also for the banks and the financial institutions, those who are already licensed by the regulators. In fact, the recent issue is about the cryptocurrencies is really huge. Obviously, the regulators also came with sandbox and everything. But again, the regulator also have a big challenge, because if they put the regulations, then the innovation is compromised, and if they don't put the regulations at all, then there is a risk whether the customers is compromised. Considering this, Mr. Bhatia, I will come to you and would like to take your views on the regulatory challenges. What could be the potential regulatory challenges, and is there any way to address them?
Yeah. See, when it comes to regulatory challenges, I think regulations are good, right? So it sort of gives a framework for companies to operate. It also sort of helps the end consumer saying, if there is an issue, this is how it's going to be resolved. Audits are there, regulations are good. I think most of the challenges, and I looked at the poll also, right? Most of the challenges are, one is the interpretation of regulation. Right. The other is because technology is growing so rapidly. Now the issue is, should we get regulations before the technology evolves to a point, or regulations should follow, once scale has been achieved. Personally, I feel that you can never predict where tech and customer experiences and products are going to take you, right? You have to be open to the market. So personally, I feel one is you have to have very it's never black and white, but very clear-cut regulations on what are the expectations, which I feel overall we have. Now, issue is, as we grow into technology, as we grow into different products, what does data security look like? What does privacy look like? How do we actually handle data onshore and offshore? All these different concepts actually muddy where you want to take our overall ecosystem. One is socioeconomic, the other is just the entire evolution of where we would want to be, say, 5 years from now. So I think I feel RBI is actually setting up a lot of these areas and actually trying to do the right thing and think ahead, setting up sandboxes, things like that. But there is also an element of sometimes regulations just have to keep a very close watch, understand where the environment is taking, and then start to regulate it. Because if you try to regulate it too early, you will stifle innovation. And if you regulate too late, then the trust in the system actually goes away, right? So what is the right balance is a very difficult balance. But that is where, I think where the magic starts to happen.
Okay. So right balance is obviously the important statement, Mr. Bhatia. Mr. Nath, would like to take your views, because we have seen a lot of changes specifically in the payment ecosystem, whether the guidelines led to payment gateways or payment aggregators. When RBI went ahead and said that the merchants or the payment gateway companies cannot store the data of the customers, if they do that, if the payment gateways and the merchants do that, perhaps they won't be able to provide the customer experience which they are doing right now. Okay. So not specifically about RBI, but when such regulations comes, what is the major challenge, and is there any way that we can address this? Because ultimately, the vision or the agenda of the payment gateway company or a merchant or a fintech company is the same, and also the regulator's agenda is also the same. that one, customer safety, and he should get a better perspective and a better service. That is how you will develop those socio-economic ecosystems, right?
Yeah. So, Amol, it's absolutely spot on in terms of the balance and the the tightrope walk which the regulators have to walk in India. See, India is a very complex country. In spite of all the push towards digital payments, cash is still king. There is trust deficit in the ecosystem, whether it is offline service providers or online. Okay,
Right.
here consumers have that extra leap of faith, or MSMEs, that now they are transacting and parting and receiving payments from people whom they don't see.
Hmm.
Okay, so the regulator takes the step of building the trust and the confidence in the ecosystem.
Hmm.
Okay, so on one side they're rightly putting all the customer redressal measures, the banking ombudsman, the online dispute resolution, the stringent guidelines on cyber security. See, these are the two guardrails under which we will have to operate as fintech. Because if the customer confidence is lost, then this whole fintech revolution, which is completely digital with a hybrid support, will all go for a toss. So the regulator is building these two right frameworks in terms of cyber security and customer redressal. Within that is where we'll have to kind of work with the regulator, with the government, to say that okay, these are your concerns.
Right.
Okay, this is how the fintech industry will provide solutions to address it. Why, without compromising on customer safety and customer experience. So it's a part of a continuous dialogue, okay, to explain to them, okay, your concerns are valid. How are we going to go about as an industry to provide that confidence and the right solutions? To give you an example, what RBI has done over the years, okay, in digital payments, it started with this additional factor of authentication. All of us are familiar with this OTP that comes in.
Yes.
Okay, what if you step back, we can say that, oh, it is coming in the way of customer experience, there are drop-offs, blah blah blah. But what RBI did was quite rightly put safety first. Started on that process. After a few years, once the system is confident, right now they have relaxed the norms. Okay,
Right.
that up to they have increased the threshold to say 5,000. You can still go ahead and do without an AFA. On contactless, they have again relaxed. Once they saw the confidence and the maturity in the ecosystem, slowly they have relaxed. I think it is a kind of working together with the regulators and the policymakers, and slowly give this confidence. In India, let's face it, it is better to be gradual. You need a break in the car so that you can go faster, and it is better done gradually, working in close collaboration over a period of time with all the risk measures in place. We wouldn't advocate, saying that, you innovate and then you have a lot of issues to catch up where customer confidence is affected.
Okay, I think got your point, Mr. Parmeshwaran. Mr. Singh, I have a very important question for you, since you started as a fintech, as an insurtech. So you understand the pain of the fintechs, right? At one side, they are creating and giving a better value to the banks and the financial institutions, but on the other side, not all the time they are getting what they were expecting, or what they should get, right? So what is the major pain point that the fintechs face when they are partnering with financial institutions or the banks? Do they get what they expect, or there are always delays from the financial institutions?
So I think, Amol, we have a very clear point of view on this question. I think number one is that we all have to appreciate that just because we have started a company doesn't mean that the rest of the industry must bend to our wishes, right? And in fact, it's the other way around. I think we firmly believe that you have to earn the right, to be trusted. You have to earn the right to ask for changes, for modifications, and process changes. And so what you find is that like if you see the journey of Policybazaar, in the initial years, as we moved, as we worked with the industry, it would have been tempting to say that insurers are very traditional, they don't want to change, etc., etc. But I think that doesn't serve anybody's purpose. I think first you have to work with what you get. You prove that you can bring business to the to the manufacturer, that your business is properly constructed. It is profit making for them. And once you are able to do that, then I think the manufacturers also are more than happy to start accommodating your requests and your changes. So one of the challenges that I see in many startups, and whether it's fintech or otherwise, is that we want on day one that everything should be done as per us, because we have this bright idea, and and maybe it may be bright and it may be actually quite brilliant in theory. But the problem is that in real life, you have to deal with real consumers, and the companies which have been around in the industry, they have been doing that for a while. So they actually understand the challenges. I mean, for instance, in insurance, fraud is part of life. And if anybody who thinks that, fraud is not important, will have a huge problem to deal with. And the same thing about regulation. I think that, when you're giving money upfront for a promise, right, because, the claim will only be paid later, the consumer has to be protected. And I think that fintechs would do well to appreciate why this framework is in place. And initially, I think first you have to work with the framework and prove your capabilities. Once you're able to prove your capabilities, then perhaps you have the right to ask for changes and various other things like that. So I feel that, and again, our experience has been that we are present both in insurance and in banking. As you know, Paisabazaar is the largest lending marketplace in India. So what we have found is that yes, it does take time. But for good reason. You have to prove your capabilities. You have to make solutions. So many times, we build the technology stacks, etc., and share them with the manufacturers. So I think you have to do the work. But once you do the work, once you're able to build business, then the manufacturers are more than keen to work with you. As you can imagine, nobody wants less business, right? All companies want more business. So there's no reason for them not to work with you. But yes, you have to earn the right, and it is a sector where credibility, trust is important. So it does take time.
Okay. I remember Mr. Bhatwal said that the experience is very important, and that's what the insurance companies are looking at, because otherwise the penetration is low and customers are not exactly looking at covering risk that aggressively. So how do you think this approach will change? What is that the insurance company should need to do? Because on one side, the products are really, really complex. Obviously, with digitalization, the products are becoming more simpler. But if I could give you a reference, that the UK company or the company from Europe called Lemonade, even if you look at the website or the mobile application of that company, looks very, very impressive, because they say that we sell policy in 30 seconds and disburse the claims in 3 minutes. Now, if you look at these kinds of, I mean, I never bought that because I live in India, but and so there could be other signs. But when you look at this kind of stuff, it looks so impressive. So what kind of approach in simplicity that the insurance companies need to carry to create an impact in the society, and also to attract more people and allow more people to participate in the journey of insurance?
So Amol, this is not an easy. Let me clearly say that to my mind, this is not a very easy question to a problem to solve, because and I'm going to talk right now more about health insurance, for example. Now, health insurance, the simplest way to solve the problem is to say everything will be covered from day one. Any medical expenses that you incur from tomorrow will be covered, and therefore there is no ifs and buts. It will be more simple, right? Because there's no question asked at that stage of selection, and there's no question asked at the stage of claims. Now that will make the product extremely expensive and prone to what is called anti-selection, where people who need insurance will come and take it, people who don't need may think, and so on and so forth, right? It's a journey that we can travel. We cannot do it, and one player cannot do it. I mean, this is a call that one has to take. For example, in Ayushman Bharat, it was a call that government took, that for hospitalization treatment, there's no question asked. You just go get treated, done. Anything happens from day one, everything is done. It is priced in that way. The whole network has been created in that way. But so there's an institution which is covering the entire mass of consumers, which is doing that. So something like that will have to happen firstly to really address the problem of where consumers think, oh, I've bought this, but I'm not getting. I thought I've got this benefit, but I've not got. Those are also problems which come up in terms of creating simplicity, because that's where you put in clauses that this is covered, this is not covered, this is from day one, this is from day 3 year, and so on and so forth, right? Second is that, can you create offerings for very specific needs, very specific requirements? COVID, for example, was a very specific need. If anything happens relating to COVID, you will get treated. So it was a simple product, but for a particular coverage. Now, I think it's a learning for the entire industry that we can replicate the same experience for many other similar needs. but is that enough for consumers? Because COVID is just one treatment and so many other things can happen. So simplicity is about offering. Simplicity is finding a way to make sure that the customer understands what they are buying. Simplicity is about making the experience when the customer is actually using that benefit to happen in a way where the consumer is expecting. So there are simplicity, to my mind, cuts across the entire, life cycle interaction between the manufacturer and the consumer, with any intermediary in between. And that's where, to my mind, technology can come in. The biggest problem today is sometimes information asymmetry that happens between the buyer and the seller, where the buyer thinks something else in the offering and the seller, is actually selling something else. That's where technology can start bringing some answers. But I think it's a journey, Amol. It's not a one day answer. We need all relevant stakeholders in this: the seller, the buyer, the intermediaries, the regulator, and whoever else might be involved to actually move towards this. A simple example of this is, like, recently from 1st October, regulator said remove many exclusions from the product. That's one step ahead. Can we do step 2, step 3, step 4? Yes, we should.
Okay, valid points. Yes, it's a journey, and let's hope that the journey will be better, and the customers and also the insurance companies, will get a better identity here. I am going to take some questions from the participants, and I will urge participants to stick to questions related to the discussion that we have. I have some questions received from the participants. So, Mr. Bhatia, I will shoot these questions to you. This question is about the alternative data and how the AI can be beneficial here. So the question is, what type of alternate data can be used to make credit accessible to the underserved consumers and small businesses?
Yeah. Very, very relevant questions. Thanks for asking that. See, overall lending card, we specialize in providing non-collateral loans to MSMEs. And our ticket size could range from, say, 1 lakh to, say, 50, 60 lakhs, but generally falls in the range of 20, 30, right? And so that's where we sort of focus on. Now, the data that we use for credit underwriting, obviously we use the bureau data, correct? But there is additional data that we actually use is the bank statement, right? And we've created an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm that basically says, how does this customer fare when it comes to best practices when it comes to credit? What is average daily balance? What is this person's PNL, right? So this additional data actually adds a lot of value on top of just a bureau score that we would get, and we are able to make more educated credit decisions on top of this. Now, if I add other additional data, right, when it comes to, say, social, or when it comes to where does the basically where does the customer stay, or it could be about what insurances this customer has. I think the next level, if we really want to open up the credit space for consumers and SMEs, this access to data. So is he a person who's actually taken insurances? Is he someone who's more responsible? The more data we will be able to actually open up credit for our customers even more. So that because actually most of the Indians don't have a good credit history at all, right? Yeah. That's the chicken and egg problem, where because of this we are not able to provide credit to customers. Obviously, aspirations of they are not able to do it. They are not able to grow their business. So it's again this whole socio-economic cycle they're in, and how do we break that? So getting access to more data, simply GST, tax, becomes a super important piece for us to actually take our consumers India to the next level, so that they will have access to more credit, more money would flow in. If more money flows in, I think they'll buy more products, they'll be much more sustainable, they'll grow into a sustainable business and things like that. So that is something that is super, super important as we move forward on getting these additional data points so that we can actually make those decisions.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bhatia. Mr. Parmeshwaran, I will shoot you this question. I think this question is asked by someone called Pawan Singh, and this question is about how can we make a digital transformation specifically into payment space in the smaller towns, maybe tier 3, tier 4.
So, Pawan, thank you for this question. Very rightly, you have hit the nail on the head. See, while digital payments have really led the path in fintech, leading the way to lending, remittances, sort of a gateway to financial inclusion, and then financial health. See the small, so in payments, you have got two pillars, right, or two principles. You need a payment acceptance network. That when you go into a shop, they have to accept digital payments. Okay, only then the consumer is able to pay. For a variety of digital infra reasons, social and cultural issues, small businesses have been staying away from adopting digital payments in a very very widespread or in a very enthusiastic way. And that is an area which I think industry as well as regulators and policymakers are working. See, two three examples let me give you. Is RBI has now created a specific infrastructure, a fund which is for offline payment infrastructure. It is called payments PFID, if I'm right, okay, Payment Facilitation Infrastructure Fund, okay, on those lines. Well, what it tries to do is that all the industry players, along with RBI government, has pulled in a fund. The fund will be used to educate MSME merchants, help them install the physical POS infrastructure or the mobile POS infrastructure for them to accept digital payments. So, the task of laying the infrastructure comes first from our side, supported by education. Only then the merchant now starts to accept. On the other side, we have to then focus on the consumer, which is constant education saying that it is safe. Please go and make the payments, at your merchant online or offline, and you are protected. At the same time, there will be incentives, right? So the government is looking at it, the industry is looking at it, the regulators are looking at it in a holistic fashion. In terms of how do we go and set up the infrastructure, educate people to adopt, and then go towards, solving this problem. So Pawan, I hope I've addressed this in terms of how we have to look at it from a perspective of first providing a helping hand, setting up the infrastructure before we can expect merchants or consumers to really adopt and thrive with digital payments.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And Mr. Singh, I would like to shoot this question to you. Are you expecting to see more bundling or unbundling of financial services from fintech going forward?
So I think again, Amol, in that question, everything is covered, right? Either you can bundle or you can unbundle. So frankly, I mean, I guess the universe is covered in that thing. But I would just say that eventually you have to figure out what is your customer proposition, right? And it could involve unbundling, it might involve bundling, and I think you have to figure out what is the customer proposition and why they should, what is the value they get, by using your product, which they can't get, today. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, perhaps the intent of the question was something else. But I'm sure we will see both things happening, because that is the nature of life, right? Some products get too complicated and then you have to simplify them, and then there are opportunities, in the unbundling. And sometimes maybe products get too simple and you have to go in the other side. So it's a continuum, right, on both sides, and you have to pick your spot and most importantly find the group of people for whom that whole bundle carries the most value. And if there are enough of those people, then you have a large business, and if there are not enough of those people, then you're a small business. So I think that's really the way it is.
Okay, maybe one or two important questions I will take with all of you, maybe in the last round. So, Mr. Batwal, I will start with you. What is that next big thing, that you see in the insurance space, or specifically the health insurance space going ahead? Because we have seen many companies entered into a general insurance space. Also, a few standalone companies entered into health insurance space, and insurance tech companies are also going aggressive, and they're also coming with customized policy, not only just typical those 2-3 policies which we used to have a decade ago, but they are now even offering a bag insurance policy or a cycle insurance policy, something like this. So going ahead, what is that next big thing do you see in the health insurance space?
So I'll say two things, specific, while there are multiple, but I'll just talk about quickly two things. One is that about 60-65% of healthcare expenditure is in the out of hospital area, right? Where people spend it outside of hospital, and for various reasons, it's not been covered in insurance, because there are issues about how do you help in pricing it, in delivering it and so on and so forth. With technology coming in and with digital health coming in, I have a lot of confidence now with a couple of barriers that needs to be removed from a regulatory and taxation perspective. There is a huge opportunity of bringing in that part of the healthcare expenditure also into the realms of insurance, which will make the product a lot more relevant for consumers, and the ability of manufacturers to create much more meaningful experience for the customer, because we'll now know the customer much better. The second one, just an extension of that, is that the COVID time has actually, one good thing has been that the whole acceptability of digital health has become significantly more than the past. Insurance, to my mind, should not just play a reactive role of funding when the customer needs. It should play a more proactive role in health, to actually work with consumers for better health outcomes, and therefore it's health insurance, it's not sickness insurance. A lot of that can be addressed with leveraging the digital health capabilities that today is available, leveraging digital platforms and finding ways to engage with consumers at scale across the entire spectrum of health, whether it's physical health, nutritional health, mental health, and so on and so forth, which will create much more meaningful partnership between the consumer and the insurer. So I think these are a couple of areas that I see as immediate opportunities for the category to look at and increase not just the penetration but also the relevance of offering for which actually is a virtuous cycle which will keep increasing penetration on its own.
Okay, noted that. I think good points. Mr. Bhatia, let me talk about the cyber security, the privacy issues. The data protection bill is still under the, what you can say, discussion phase. But when you look at the credit companies or specifically banks and BFCs, it is very important for them to have a data. And when it is data, there are privacy and cyber related issues. How NBFCs like you or how banks and the financial institutions stay and prevent the privacy, because you are dealing with a lot of third party vendors also, in terms of aggregation, the data and everything. So what are you doing over there?
So one is, understanding the data, right? So when you look at data, there is data at rest and there's data at transit. Now, how do you make sure that data at rest and data at transit have accessibility where you know who's going to be able to access it? What are the data elements that need to be encrypted so that everybody doesn't have access? So there are a lot of these hygiene things that in the growth phase, companies sort of not do that, and that's where regulations come in. And we want to make sure that all these things are taken care of. So cybersecurity is again a problem where the entire world is sort of who's going to be first. What are the areas that we could be exposed to, and people actually get access to this data, right? So it is a problem. The way we actually do it is understand data. How does it transit at rest? Where is it? Who should have access to it? Is it encrypted? And that's where we want to make sure that we have a very tight policy also when it comes to data exchange. So these are the things that we sort of work on a constant basis, right? At the minute you lay your guard down is the time when someone will try to get access to information and data. So that's a constant battle, and every company that deals with data has to try and actually be ahead of this issue.
Okay. Mr. Parmeshwaran, as the fintech ecosystem is growing, a lot of foreign players are also entering in India. Fintech specifically from Middle East and Europe are, very, very aggressively planning to enter in India. What are the major obstacles for the foreign fintechs if they want to enter in India and want to take a benefit of, fintech ecosystem? You have any thoughts over there?
So, firstly, India is one of those ecosystems which is allowing people, not just domestic companies but also international fintech startups to come and participate, right? So foreign fintechs or players bring in capital, bring in technology, bring in new ways of thinking to address the problems. Okay, so it adds to the vibrancy of the ecosystem and also gives a lot of choice. Okay. The government and the regulators have been pretty open in the sense that, if you comply to the laws of the land, okay, you can bring in your money, you can start your operations here. Okay. And as long as you protect the customer from a cyber security and redressal, it's fine. Okay. Typically, what we have experienced is so for us, we have been in India for 10 years. Okay. We are an Indian company for all practical purposes. There are two things that come to our mind as we see a lot of companies wanting to come in and look at India. See, firstly, we have to look at the whole cost and the economic model of how it works in India is very different than very other developed economies. Surely go by the per capita income. India is about $2,000 versus the economies they will come from will be 15,000 to say $80,000. So the sheer purchasing power, okay, is quite different. So how do you structure your operations here to serve very cost effectively the Indian requirement and the Indian user? Okay, is the number one. Number two, the again being such a diverse and complex country. Okay, it is many states and countries within India itself, right? So region to region, how are you going to cater to this audience, whether it is the consumer or SME, becomes a huge challenge. Unlike those markets where you can find a sort of homogeneity, largely. So that's the second challenge that you know uh, they need to kind of understand and overcome. The third one is how do you really become local and become a part of the Indian fabric? See, Indians are on one side very business savvy, at the same time very emotional. So the local connect becomes very important. But at the same time, let me tell you our experience. India is that market where not only you can thrive and support the customers and do a good business, but you can also take Indian models, the economic and the business models, and export and apply them to other countries. So it's a very unique opportunity that India presents.
Thanks, Mr. Parmeshwaran. I think, valid points. But before I wrap up, I will just take one quick question with you, Mr. Singh. So India is a diverse country, and now everybody wants to rebuild India. The focus is on the rural economy. Going ahead, what kind of growth do you see specifically in the rural India in terms of insurance business? And, what kind of changes do you see at your company and also in the insurtech space in terms of, building a society by, distributing more products over there?
So I think Amol, the opportunity in India is very big, both on the rural and the urban side. I think it's not that urban India has been covered. So if you see retail penetration of whether health insurance or term insurance is sub 5%. Even if you take a more sort of considered set, right? Because all of India may not be relevant to have this insurance. There also, the penetration is in sub 10% kind of range. So I think we're just getting started. I think rural India is a different challenge. I think rural India again has relatively well-off people, and it has people who are not so well-off. And what we believe is that the not so well-off people will have to be covered by government schemes. So I think the government has to focus on lifting those people out of their current situations and helping them. And I think the private and public sector insurance companies and people like Policybazaar, we can focus on the layer just above that and help those people with products which are sensible from their perspective as well as from the manufacturer's perspective. So we see this playing out. I will confess that we are not very big in rural India right now, but it is an opportunity for us, and we are always focused on finding ways to crack that puzzle and be present there as well.
Okay, noted that, Mr. Singh, and I think the time is up. Wish I could have taken some more questions, but I must say that I really learned a lot from all of you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you, Mr. Batwal. Thank you, Mr. Bhatia, and thank you, Mr. Parmeshwaran, for sharing remarkable insights here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amol. Thank you,
Have a great
team.
day.
Yeah, have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
Right. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thanks to all panelists. And we have had some brilliant insights coming out from this session today, discussing from agri-fintechs driving the ecosystem in the future, need for effective cross-border payment ecosystem, direct consumer connect being the key for the fintech future, and the cost of out-of-hospital healthcare being the area of interest for the future health insurance companies or insurtech companies is something that stands out among many other standout points of this session. But with that, I would like to thank all the panelists today for joining us, and wish you all have a great day ahead. And for our audience though, I now request the audience to take a moment to complete the poll to provide the feedback on today's session and share your ideas for future ones. Now, your feedback is extremely important for us to bring more and more such sessions to you, and details on joining the Interchange platform for deeper discussions will soon be on your screens. And I will also be part of the email that you will receive after this session. And I encourage you all to join and engage with the like-minded community on Interchange. Once again, I thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you found this session to be very useful, and we look forward to seeing you for our next session very soon. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day ahead.